You're listening to another ambitious entrepreneurnetwork.com podcast, the voice for entrepreneurs and small business. Now, onto the show.
Welcome to Industry Thought Leader Podcast. Stand out, be heard, influence. Want to influence real change with your message while become known as an authority in your field? Industry Thought Leader Podcast will show you how. Now, over to your host, Anne-Marie Cross.
And welcome to another episode of Industry Thought Leader Podcast, brought to you by Industry Thought Leader Academy. Stand out, be heard, and influence. My name's Anne-Marie Cross, also known as the podcasting queen. Now, my guest today says a happy, successful life is based on a foundation of loving what you do and who you do it with. Joining me on today's show is Barry Demp. The 1992 Olympic Games inspired Barry to pursue coaching high integrity, motivated and open-minded professionals. Well, that is his passion. And over the past 27 years, Barry has worked with thousands of individuals and hundreds of organizations. Now, on today's show, Barry is going to share with us innovative and tried and true success best practices to help us operate in new ways to pursue and achieve our goals. He's also going to talk about how we can produce extraordinary results beyond what we think is predictable in both our personal and professional lives. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. It's a great pleasure to be with you.
I love that you've said in the introduction here, the 1992 Olympic Games inspired you to pursue coaching. What was it about them that inspired you?
So I've always had an interest in, being one's best. And the Olympics is really just a terrific example of, individuals athletically being their very best. So one day I was just watching the normal games and they did a documentary on the Olympic Village. And they showed that there were 5,000 athletes, but there were also 2,000 coaches. And, even though I don't have an advanced math degree, I could do the math and realize that every athlete who was pursuing a gold medal had a coach. And I thought, what a great idea if we could bring this idea of coaching to the business world and to our worlds in general so that we could have gold medal lives. So when I looked around, there was nobody doing that. And I thought, well, somebody should do that. So you've probably heard the phrase, if you point your finger, 3 fingers are actually pointing back at you. Mm-hmm. So it hit me like, wow, maybe I should do that. Yeah. So my company offered a buyout, those times when they give you a week of pay for every year you have, and then they give you another week of pay if you promise never to sue them. So I was in the pharmaceutical industry at the time. And I thought that was a great thing. So I simply resigned. When people said, what are you going to do? I said I was going to be a business coach. And they said, well, what is that? So in the very beginning, I just proceeded to make it up. So I kind of thought I invented it. And today, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry with 60,000 coaches around the world.
Yeah, you are a pioneer. Which is wonderful. And I love that because we're now able to step into kind of the things that you've learned. And one of the things that I read just recently, if I can recall it correctly, is that hindsight will often provide us with the insight that provides us foresight moving forward. And as we know, on a global scale, we are now faced, many of us, with challenges we've never yet had to face before. But I'm sure that we can learn from, previous situations, and I'm sure you're going to share today on how we can move forward. One thing I'd like to ask, what have you seen change over the years, besides the fact that we now have a term business coach? What things have you seen change over the last 27 years when it comes to the coaching space?
Well, I would say that the whole idea of coaching athletically was always understood as a way of achieving excellence. And I think, when we really look at our lives in general, all coaching is actually life coaching or personal coaching. It just so happens that at least half of it is our career or our business or, our vocation. So the idea of wanting to be our very best in those areas but also know that when we go home at the end of the day, we would like those achievement-oriented aspects to spill over. So as spouses, as parents, as siblings, as neighbors, as members of our community. So this idea of what does it mean to have an extraordinary life in service of others as well as simply enjoying this time that we're on this wonderful planet of ours. So I think this idea of being our best and seeing how coaching is a model to bring out our best and express our best and iterate much more quickly to achieve more in a more meaningful way seems to have really resonated in this day and age.
Which is, I think, is wonderful. And even hearing and watching some of the conversations with leaders in corporations and organizations. And often we had heard in the past, your life stays home. When you're at work, work is work. When you're at life, but we bring life because we're human beings, and every part of our life impacts our mindset and how we show up. So I'm glad we're starting to have more of those conversations in business and corporate too. Let's talk about some of the innovative and tried and true success best practices to help us operate in new ways to be able to pursue and achieve our goals. What are some of these innovative ways?
Well, I actually sent you a list of 24. So if you don't mind me putting it a little bit back on you, what I typically do with this presentation or this program or this topic is, as you know, it's always about the audience. What are they interested? What resonates with them? What pulls or tugs at their heartstrings or whatever it is. So obviously I have lots of favorites of my own. And at the same time, let's say you are my audience of one that's streaming to an audience of others. So if you would go through a couple of your own favorites, I can kind of chime in and give my perspective on where and how that might support you as my audience of one.
Yeah, I love that. One thing that I often will do, let me just go through that list because and find some out, the ones that I would love to discuss further with you. One of the things that I love to do also too is maybe highlight what are some of the things that you see people doing that will stop them? Because sometimes, the gaps, sometimes the mistakes or the misunderstandings, the misperceptions can often stop. So what would you say are the biggest, maybe one or two things that are stopping people when it comes to, kind of having dreams and goals and not really ever achieving them? Are there some things that come to mind for you?
Sure. One of the big aspects of coaching is simply to dramatically improve somebody's self-awareness. So you've heard the phrase, wherever you go, there you are. And there you are with your inner voice. And your inner voice is always chattering and speaking to you. So the voice says, you're no good, or you're not good enough, or that'll never work, and things of that sort. Sometimes those phrases are called gremlins, or that negative inner voice, or whatever it is. And many times we just simply listen to that for various reasons, whether that be fear or being embarrassed or whatever it would be. So shifting one's mindset in terms of noticing that inner voice, thank it for sharing, and then do what we're committed to doing. So by tapping into our commitments, our values, our beliefs, really our top priorities, we can find the courage within ourselves to supersede that comfort zone and that inner voice that says, you should play smaller, you should keep your head down and keep it out of the way so you aren't judged by anybody, so to speak. So this idea of we have this one life, let's live it boldly, let's live it courageously, let's swing a little bit for the fences, as we would say in baseball season. And to some degree, leaving my corporate job for 12 and a half years and becoming a coach at the age of 35 years old with 2 children and a house and a mortgage payment, that was me going for it, so to speak, and saying, this is going to turn out because I'm not going to stop.
Love that. Love that. One of the things, and I'm just going through the incredible resources that you shared through, and why I want to give you an opportunity to speak a little bit more to this is that when back in the day, my career started as a career coach, and one of the things that would often be in a conversation, a typical conversation, was, Anne-Marie, I don't know what's different. I don't know what's changed, but a job that I was really feeling fulfilled and motivated in no longer excites me. I don't know what's changed. And it was that the values of the corporation or things had changed, the workplace, the environment had changed and did not anymore align with the core values of the individual. We don't hear a lot around core values. People don't really know what are my top core values. Can you let's talk a little bit about that, because I'm sure that that is going to be one of the best practices, is to understand and recognize what are my core values, and is this experience, is this opportunity going to align with that? And if there is, then obviously people can feel more motivated and fulfilled. Can you talk a little bit about core values?
Sure. When I was early in my career, when you talked about a vision statement or a mission statement or core values, it was very, very common for executives and leaders to really put that down and kind of poo-poo it. If you have heard of Jim Collins actually debunked that in his pioneering book, Before Good to Great. And that book was called Built to Last. And what he did was tremendous amounts of research on a number of companies and found around 13 or so companies that outperformed other companies by a factor of 14-fold based upon stock price. And that got people's attention. So this idea was, what made those companies special? And what he found was that those companies had cultures based upon unified, shared, committed values. So when we can extrapolate that idea that's suddenly now relevant to the individual, connecting the who I am, my vision, my values, my commitments, my priorities, my principles, and how do I express them in my day-to-day activities, especially through my work. So that connection between who I am and what I do is a tremendous, tremendous source of fulfillment, satisfaction, and achievement. So a more pioneering day-to-day kind of social scientist, Daniel Pink, in his book Drive, points to just the importance of purpose based upon values as critical for an individual and an organization to be driven.
Brilliant, brilliant. What would be, let me just get me back on screen here, because I'm going through all these resources. They're brilliant, and we're going to talk about those in a moment. What would be one of the first things for people to start getting clear on some of their top core values? The reason I ask that is because often, there are certain things that resonates with us. For instance, some of my top core values are integrity and excellence, kind of pursuing mastery in what I do. Community connection, making a difference. These are all really important. Then there's some other values that are important to me, but they're not what I would call deal breakers. I think Dr. Phil said those are deal breakers. And so we have this long list. What is something that perhaps you've done and maybe you've seen your clients do really well to help them really narrow down on some of those top core values? Because often if they're not there and doesn't obviously align and support our vision and our mission statements, that is when we really can feel demotivated and not being able to show up as their best. How can people start to delineate that and really come up with those core values?
Well, there's two suggestions that I would have. In the work that I do, I actually use a tiny piece of the work of Peter Senge. He wrote a book called The Fifth Discipline, and he has a Fifth Discipline field book. And in that, there's an exercise where there are 60 core values. What I would have is my clients at the very early stages of our work together, I would have them narrow that list of 60 to 20. And then narrow that list of 20 to 10, and then narrow that list of 10 to 3. And through dialogue and discussions, we really find out, which ones am I going to trade off? Which ones are a deal breaker, got to have it, and which ones are, that would be nice to have, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And then this idea is we need to road test them. We need to find out how much of our behavior is actually demonstrated day to day through our actions in our professional and personal communities. And sometimes you can also interview people who are very close to them, families, friends, close colleagues as well, to see how they show up, day in and day out, especially when the going gets tough sometimes. So for the most part, once one's core values are really founded and grounded, I use an exercise. It's called the juicing exercise. So if you can imagine you being an orange and I squeezed all the juice out of you and then took all the water out of the juice, I would then have concentrated Anne-Marie. We would then concentrate you, put you back the water, and then we would actually have a true life vision statement that would be contextually aligned with what makes you tick. And then when we look at that in the morning, that generates our behavior. And when we look at that at the end of the day, we get to say, yeah, how did I do? And hopefully we get another day tomorrow to give it another go and do our best then. But who we are and what we do is fundamental to that satisfaction we have. Do we leap out of bed with excitement and energy? 27 years later, I still very, very much enjoy what I do. And I have no interest in any form of traditional retirement because it's very satisfying.
Yeah.
I want that for everybody. I want everybody to somehow find a way to leap out of bed and have that degree of alignment between their vision and values and what they do in a vocation.
Yes, I love that. We've had Marina de Leon. I hope that that's how you pronounce your name. So please list the books and resources if you don't mind. Thanks. Well, Barry is a prolific content creator. So let me just give you his website right now so you can go over and check it all out. There are some quotes. I've opened up an ebook or a book that he's created, and so there's some incredible quotes which we'll ask Barry to dive into. But to go to Barry's website, I'll give it to you now, is let me get it on screen so I'll give you the right one, is dempcoaching.com. That is the best place to go and seek out all of the resources that Barry has. But I love in the book the quotable quotes, the quotable coach, daily nuggets of practical, actually I've got, what's the name of the title, because hang on, daily nuggets of practical wisdom. There's one that I found here, Barry, I'd love to dive into a little deeper with you today, because I think it fits in beautifully with the situations that we're finding ourselves in. Let me just scroll down and find it again. And this is number 16. The tests of life are not meant to break you, but to make you. And you've got Norman Vincent Peale, American minister and author, was someone that you quoted there. Let's talk about that, because at the moment, I think many of us around the world are really being tested at the moment. So they're not meant to break us, but to make us. Share a little bit more about this, please.
When we wake up in the morning, we've made it. We're actually successful. We made it to this point in time, whether you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 or older. My father, I am so honored that he's going to be 94 years old in August.
Wow.
But, life is really a test, but you only get the lessons after you take the test, right?
Yeah.
So every day to not expect to be tested is ridiculous, because life is never going to go exactly as we want it. And if it does, that's an anomaly, so to speak. So even if we fail, even if we come short, even if we're disappointed, one of the key things is, what did I learn? So for me, learning something every day, many things a day, is just fundamental for me to be happy. So, I'm the guy that watches National Geographic, and I'm interested in astronomy and science, and I read a lot. So it's like, well, I love that. So I'm boring, I'm a nerd, whatever it would be. But this idea of we're taking a test every day. We might be testing our patience. We might be testing our courage. We might be testing our leadership, and so on. Yeah. So the idea is like, oh, what's happening in my world? So being self-aware, noticing how we're responding, how we're acting. Are we fearful? What's going on? And then what is there for us to do based upon that? And then we do something, and the world's going to give us feedback. It's going to say, that worked, you should do that more. Or that didn't work, you should try something else. That's why one of my favorite quotes is, when patterns are broken, new worlds will emerge. Well, my clients want new worlds to emerge, and for them, they need to be prepared to break some patterns, do things differently. So this idea of, it's a test. And we only get the lessons after we take the test, instead of we can study for it ahead of time. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. And we've got Craig here. For those people who are listening to the audio, you need to come on and join the lives. It's a great to be able to share. And of course, Craig, thank you for your comment. He's saying that's spot on. So great that you are here, being able to benefit from today. I love the next quote that you've listed in the quotable coach here, Barry, and it fits beautifully. You know, number 16, we talked about the test of life are not meant to break you, but to make you. And then number 17, Theodore Roosevelt, 26th American president, says, do what you can with what you have where you are. Wow. Speak some more about this one.
You know, that old phrase, someday is not a day of the week. You know, I will be successful someday. So this idea, you may have heard the phrase be and do and have. Well, people want to have all kinds of things. But coming from a place of our own authenticity and genuineness, so to speak, you know, we are where we are. And this idea of really being present. And that could simply be a conversation with your spouse or your child or a colleague. You know, what's going on right now? And what can I do now to forward that and contribute to that and create value here? Because I'm not going to create it anywhere else besides here. So, you know, there was once a little comic where there was a dog that was just sitting with a thought bubble above its head. And the thought bubble just said, now, 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 now. Mm-hmm. So dogs, when they're hungry, and dogs, when they want to go for a walk, want to go for a walk. So this idea, like, why can't we as people always do that? Too much of our time is reflecting on the past with regret. Too much of our time is pining about the possible future with trepidation or fear or anticipation. But we're only present in the now. So that idea, like, all right, you know, what can I do to forward this? So with that in mind, how can I bring my best self to this situation in some form of contribution?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Brilliant. Love that. And thanks, Craig. He said here, yes, Barry, what do we do with what we've learned? Yeah, brilliant. Something that when we're talking about, you know, how to produce extraordinary results beyond what's predictable in both personal and professional lives, I think everything that you've spoken so far adds to that as well. But one of the quotes here that you've mentioned in your book, and it's number 23, I think this one can really keep us stuck. Even if we have the best of intentions, we're breaking through those patterns, Barry. But here's what number 23 says. It says, keep away from people who try to belittle your ambitions. Small people always do that, but the really great make you feel that you too can become great. And of course, you quote here Mark Twain, American author and humorist. I think as we start to break patterns and we start to, you know, there's almost like this inner, you know, confidence that comes. People will start to notice that. And some of those people, as you've referenced in number 23, the smaller people who don't really recognize that can keep us stuck. So share some insights to help us here, please.
Well, let's use a little bit of an exercise. Now, you are transmitting around the world on this platform. So I'd like to consider that our vision and our values, our personality, our beliefs are just like transmitters. We get to put ourselves out there into the world and share who we are and what we're all about and those intentions. Now, if we're a transmitter, other people are potentially a receiver. So if they tune in and can tune in to us, then we're going to resonate on the same frequency and our signal will get through. Now, let's flip that around. Other people are transmitters too. But what if they're putting off a bad vibe? What if they're liars or cheaters or stealer or unethical or whatever else might be putting out? Our tuners will not pick that up. And those people literally should not be in our lives. And hopefully we have the courage to simply say, you know, that doesn't serve me. I'm not meant to be with you. You're not meant to be with me. And if we start aligning ourselves with people that have the same kind of frequency, the same kind of energy, the same kind of mojo, the same kind of intentions and contribution and so on. And as we up our game, we're going to attract other people who are upping their game as well. So when we get rid of things that we're tolerating, things that suck the life out of us, one of those in particular can be actually toxic people. and to realize whether that's through social media or the news or television or the books we read, who serves us, who supports us on that same frequency, so to speak. So I like that idea of putting it out there and see who actually picks up the signal, and we get to listen really, really carefully. So that's why I think you and I, we're on the same frequency, Marianne and Marie.
Yeah. Oh, look, absolutely. I love, you challenged me, picked my favorites, but as I'm going all through these, they're all brilliant. They're all brilliant, Barry. And we'll certainly share how people can get access to the Quotable Coach. And I love that you've created, daily nuggets, and it certainly can support us. Something else that I've seen, number 26, and I'm going to share what that is. I think this can really stop us from producing extraordinary results, beyond what we thought was even possible, both personally and professionally, is this. When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. Lao Tzu, Chinese philosopher, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, but how right is that? When we let go of what we are or who we think we are, and the internal critic and everything, we might become what we might be. Speak a bit more about this, Barry, because I think we can all relate to this.
Well, I'm going to kind of shift over into a little bit of a different best practice, okay? So years ago, I learned from another professional development expert that there are 4 magic words, and I'll share them with you and your listeners. The words are more and less and start and stop. So when we think of what we want more of in our life, or to have more in life, or do more in our life, we can identify that and actually start infusing that into our day. But when we look at less, what would we like less of, or to do less of, that takes away our energy, our vitality? What would we start to do? Most of us are pretty darn busy. And that's why that last word's so important. Could I actually stop something, delete that, to make room for the new person that I'm becoming? So in the last 4 years, I've started meditating and doing all kinds of other new and different things. So the whole nature of coaching is to iterate, to try new things, and to keep some of them, and to look at the things that we currently do, including our habits that may not always serve us. We can replace an old habit that doesn't serve us. It might be a nutritional habit, an exercise habit, a sleeping habit, or a lack of listening habit, or whatever we may do. But let's take those words again. What is the more of your life, or the less of your life, or the start of your life? And what could I stop to make some room for that?
Yeah, brilliant.
And we can do that daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, like a year in review, a month in review, a quarter in review, so to speak. And we can even ask people in our communities, what would they like us to stop? Where are we happy that we could actually start something new, like a new hobby, whatever that may be?
Yeah, I like the way that you've encouraged us to do that, because I think, and maybe just keeping that mindfulness around that, because sometimes we can find ourselves getting into patterns which really don't serve us. And yet if we're able to take a step back and say, what in this situation can I change? Maybe even we need to continue to do something that worked really well. And we don't know that unless we have awareness and acknowledgement of that. So it's probably something that we always just have there, is to be able to check in to make sure that, we're heading in the right direction. Because I know, such as yourself, Barry, I love learning new things, and I can go off, and it's almost sometimes I think, don't follow that little sliver of an idea, because I can go off into a whole other, realm of, because things are interesting, when you've got that curiosity.
Anne-Marie's, years and years ago, I read an article in a magazine called Fast Company, and it was "Life Balance is Bunk," B-U-N-K. And given that I was a coach, I kind of wanted to take exception to that idea, but got a copy of the magazine, read it carefully, and what I found was fascinating. And that what it said was, life balance is bunk because we actually have to choose our imbalances. We have more of this because we want more of this. We have less of this because we want less of this. not 8 hours of this, 8 hours of this. So the key determinant there is, are you happy? I know people who work 12 hours a day and are happy. I know people who work 6 hours a day that are miserable. Oh. So this idea of choosing our imbalances is a unique perspective on what's a good life look like. If you love reading books, if you love, I don't know, taking walks, if you love, basset hounds, people do. It's like, oh, okay, let's be happy.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I have 8 hours of this and 8 hours of that, and I'm still miserable, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I thought that was pretty provocative. It's bunk.
Yeah. And it changes, doesn't it? Season to season. I mean, that's different for all of us. And sometimes it's just giving ourselves permission. If you want to go and hang out more with your hound dogs or bass hounds, that's fine, because it gives you joy. Choose more of that.
Right.
If it's family or whatever, out in nature, choose more of that. And I think once we get to a stage where we're able to do that, whatever lights, your soul and spirit, then when we are at work or we're focusing on something, you bring a whole different perspective to it, don't you? And yeah.
So Anne-Marie, there's a book that was written by a gentleman named Clay Christensen. He used to be a professor at Harvard. And I think it's one of the most provocative titles of a book I've ever heard. The book is called How Will You Measure Your Life? And if that doesn't get an eyebrow or two raised. So we all know about extrinsic things, cars and houses and money in the bank and stuff like that. But today, with COVID and all these other things going on in the world with racism and global warming and all these other things, how are we going to keep score? And when we look at the intrinsic aspects, to what degree did I live my vision, my values, my beliefs? To what degree did I feel a life of purpose? Was it significant versus successful, so to speak? But that's worth contemplating. How will we measure our life, and how did I used to measure it when I was in my 20s and 30s? And, how does my father at 93, 94 years old, how does he measure it? It may be, I got to watch 4 episodes on Netflix, or I got to listen to Frank Sinatra and Barbara Streisand on my Google Home device at home, or I got to talk to my great grandbaby over video chat today. That was a good day. Or they didn't ruin my meal or whatever that I had at my assisted living. Okay. But I think from time to time, like you said, it changes.
Yeah, it does. It does. And everything that we've been speaking about today, I love the way that we've really focused on, not looking at those external things as controlling us, because I've learned over the years, no matter what's going on, no one can control you and your happiness or even your pursuit of happiness. I mean, here in Melbourne, Australia, we have now gone into the second lockdown, and we now need to wear masks when we're out, because it's been shown that maybe that will stop the spread of the virus. And people are getting up in arms and saying, it's just control. Well, you know what? If I have to wear a mask, I'll wear a mask if it's going to protect someone else and myself and my family. But that's not control, because they don't get to control what's going on inside here. No one does, unless we allow them to. I can still go out. I love going out in the country with my camera. I can't do that. But guess what? There are YouTube channels, and people have gone out. One of my dreams is to photograph eagles. And anytime we've gone out here, Barry, I reckon every eagle in our nation goes, shh, she's out again, let's hide. So I've got colleagues and friends who live in Canada, beautiful Canada, and who've got beautiful pictures. I will go and watch those, so there's always a way, but it starts within here, isn't it? And no one control that unless you allow them to. So, and we've had Craig here. I want to acknowledge Craig here. Great discussion. I've shared this to my connections. Well, I thank you, and I'm sure Barry does too. And we have just scratched the surface. There is so much more value. So, Barry, why don't you share with people how they can connect? What's the best way? We've already mentioned your website, so if you'd like to repeat that for those people who may have only just heard or come across this live stream, what's the best way to connect with you?
The best way to connect with me is simply just go to Barry at barrydempcoaching.com. You can also look me up on LinkedIn. I've been on that platform since 2003. Just make sure you spell my name correctly. I am greatly honored for people to sign up for my blog. So I have been writing a blog called The Quotable Coach that you've referenced so kindly for 9 years, 5 days a week. So if you go to thequotablecoach.com, you can sign up for absolutely free. And that website, if you go to a drop-down menu that says categories, you can have access to over 2,700 quotes, commentaries, and exercises that you can read in all in under a minute. And if you really, really, really want it, go to Amazon and you can pick up the book called The Quotable Coach, Daily Nuggets of Practical Wisdom, and you get a whole year of coaching from myself from the early years. So my coach that I worked with, we took about 3 years of those and took the best ones, and we have 365 in that book. So people would put that on their coffee table and even perhaps share that over a meal with their children or their spouse, just to discuss some of these things a little deeply, within their own communities.
Yeah. What I love about that and the ones that we shared today, you talked about looking at various patterns and breaking them and pattern interrupt. And I think those quotes and what you share on your website is a great way to do that. It halts some of our thinking, doesn't it? When we read something, think, how can I apply that to my life? And so thank you so much for coming on the show today and inspiring us with your insights that you shared, and really appreciate you doing that. So thanks once again for coming on the show.
It's a great pleasure. And anytime, I really enjoyed our chat to get to know one another, and you're doing just extraordinary work, putting my voice and the voice of other leaders in their fields in service of other people. So thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.